Hey, welcome to your weekend. News Radio 600 Kogo, San Diego Business Saturday. I'm Sully. Great to have you along today. Coming up, we're going to get to talk to Phil Blair from Manpower. I talked about this on the air with LaDonna this week. Ted was out of town. Wow, are we having one of those sections in trading whereby fear and greed have taken over officially? And I get talked to or asked about daily about this stuff, but we're going to have to spend a little bit of time with this, because with all of this talk about the U.S.-China trade war, I think it's time that we revisit how the whole mess started. I'll be talking to Christina Gustin from UBS and RKG Wealth Management, as well as Tom DelBacarro, who wrote the book The Divided Era and PoliticalVanguard.com. Tom is also a contributor for Fox Business Network, as well as MSNBC and a number of other business networks. So I'll be depending on him today as well. So the markets, let's just talk about the markets for 1 second, because we saw literally over the last 2 weeks, well over $1 trillion wiped off the table in market value, and then we got a little bit back. But if you look at a chart from where we were literally 3 months ago on the Dow Jones, it's sort of a tale of tweets, is it not? We've dropped since May 5th, since the May 5th Donald Trump tweet, which is difficult to say. This has been one of those really interesting times in our history of trading and stock market, to where even the institutional guys got sucked into the fear and greed. And I think that Christina Gustin will agree with me on this when I pull her up on the line, because honestly, there is some fundamental worry. There is some fundamental worry about the China trade deal. But is there any of us that really thinks this is not going to get done? Because it is going to get done. Look, let's talk about how the whole mess started. U.S. and China have been engaged in a trade war, much like a Cold War, for some time. And it involves the mutual placement of tariffs. So Donald Trump exercises authority granted by Congress back in 1974 under what's called the Trade Act to unilaterally impose tariffs on $250 billion of Chinese goods and increase the tariffs on another $200 billion, which is essentially everything that they export to us. Well, do you realize that they have been levying taxes on 97% of what we export to them versus our 37% for years? It's not really the point, but the bottom line is it's not as if it's been a fair deal all along. This is legitimately the biggest trade war in economic history so far. And now we're seeing retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods. So how'd the whole thing start? Pretty simple. Beijing's misbehavior. China's misbehavior, specifically on U.S. intellectual property rights, the creation of state-owned enterprises that steal our ideas, manufacture them cheaper, create counterfeit products, a.k.a. fake Nikes, fake Louis Vuitton, taking our intellectual property. That, and the fact that China imposes tariffs again on 95% of U.S. imports versus the very small percentage that we impose. Truth is that Chinese-American trade is a pillar. I don't think I'm overstating that. It's a pillar of the international economic landscape, because it gives high growth to both of us. And we're superpowers. China and America are both superpowers economically. But it benefits the rest of the world. This is why everyone's looking. This is why when you see our market do one thing, overnight the European markets and the Japanese markets do another thing. Okay? We need a fair deal for all in place. And look, there's going to be some pain when you see change like this. Tom DelBacarro is going to spend a little bit of time talking to us about this today. But one estimate by academics from Yale and academics from UCLA and Berkeley and Columbia calculate all tariffs already have added $69 billion in annual costs for American consumers. Now, if you think in terms of that, guys, before the latest escalation, the National Bureau of Economic Research says an all-out trade war could eventually cost more than $300 billion. This hasn't cost us anything yet. And the interesting part is that tariffs are not paid by the U.S. consumer. I'll tell you who does bear the burden. And by the way, a tariff is nothing more than a tax levied on imported goods, and most important of all, it's not U.S. citizens, nor is it China that pays tariffs. It's the American importers, the American companies that pay, which is in effect a tax increase that they may or may not pass on to you and I, if they choose to use Chinese parts, Chinese goods and such. And yes, it's everything from medical devices to cars and those little umbrellas in your drinks. Joining us now on News Radio 600 KOGO, Christina Gustin, who is the wealth manager at UBS, as well as RKG Wealth Management. Christina, are you tired of talking about this? Because I'm tired of talking about it because we're talking about the same thing we have been for 4 weeks. And honestly, fear and greed have still entered into the market. Fear and greed has still entered into, I'm assuming, your client base as well.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me, first of all. I'm not tired of talking about it, and honestly, I think we should get used to talking about it for a while longer.
Don't say that. I don't want to I don't want to hear that. Oh my gosh,
I think our team, our research team, agrees with you that it will ultimately be resolved. I think that what the U.S. and China are doing right now is just kind of scratching the surface of, an all-out trade war. We still have a lot of tools in our arsenal that I hope both countries will not use. For example, China holds like 7% of the U.S. government's outstanding debt, and we don't want them to start selling that. But, our base case is that it will be resolved by the end of the year. So we're kind of focused on the timeline. The G20 summit is coming up in late June. We don't think they're going to get anything done there other than probably continuing to say, we're making progress, things are going well, but our hope is that before the end of the year there will be some sort of resolution. But between now and then, I think we're going to continue to see all kinds of volatility like we did this week.
So how do you combat that? Is there an offensive strategy during times like this for investors? And by the way, I just want to say, I never recommend that you handle your own investment account, which is why, and by the way, RKG Wealth Management nor UBS are sponsors of this program. So there's no agenda here in the advice I give you about them and the opinion offered by Christina. But my point is, I don't think anyone should be handling their retirement account because of the very thing that you have to deal with every day, and that's the fear and greed. But is there an offensive strategy that guys like you take, Christina, at UBS, where I know there's certainly defensive strategies, but is there ways that you guys see maybe gaps in the fence here where you can crawl under and make a little bit of money or take advantage, or are we all running for safety right now?
No, a little bit. I think, like you said, it's offense and defense. I think the defense is understanding, don't let the fear and greed dictate your portfolio moves, and we believe the bull market is still intact. I think towards the end of last year, the economy was showing, some signs of overheating, but those have since cooled off a little bit. So we think we're late cycle. So that means things are still pretty good. In terms of the offense, I think we're looking at, in those accounts that are more actively traded, looking at sectors that might be hurt by a prolonged trade war. I mean, we've seen big moves this month. People have been dumping sectors that are affected by trade, like think about industrials. We've seen some big moves down in a lot of tech stocks. So, there's opportunities there for players that we think are good quality names long term. So we're always looking for things like that.
Okay, so here's my question. I get every day, how is this going to affect my wallet? Now, look, folks might be surprised to hear. Let's talk about San Diego for a second. Illumina, ResMed, Acon Laboratories. Some of the medical equipment companies are going to be affected. People might be surprised to hear that Volvo and VW, Ford, Buick, all have manufacturing ties to China. Not just parts, but full-blown assembly. The big question, of course, is how does this affect the wallet? And that really is the big question in everyone's mind. If these tariffs take effect, and by the way, remember, it's not you, it's not me, it's not the Chinese government that pays tariffs. It's the importers that pay the tariffs and sometimes pass on. I say sometimes because, look, they can use another place for parts or imports. Namely, Vietnam seems to be the place that's coming out on top here because they've got a cheaper labor force, they got a laissez-faire government, and we do have a choice on where we get our parts and such from. But I guess the question is, are we going to see prices go up on everyday items like peanut butter, orange juice, jeans? I believe we're going to see the tug on our wallet with big ticket items affected by these tariffs like TVs and major appliances and automobiles. So if you think in terms of that, there's open air indicators that Christina can tell you about that, when you're looking at the overall stock market, when you see energy start or transportation stocks start up, they usually signal a few things. Could these tariffs signal anything with respect to trouble for some U.S. companies? Because let's face it, what I just described there, TVs, major appliance, cars, you can think of some pretty big U.S. companies that could suffer as a result of having to raise prices, and then suddenly people can't afford their goods and services, right? That affects stocks at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on with that. And I think, we're also looking at what are the macro effects of those increases in prices. And I saw in one of our House View weekly reports a stat that said that the current tariffs, if they were all enacted, could shave something like 0.3% off the U.S. economy and continue to reduce the growth of our gross domestic product, meaning that an additional percentage point, which would in turn increase the risk of recession. We want to know what is the long-term effect. So yes, household prices could go up. I think appliance prices could go up, major purchases. But is this the thing that ends up triggering a recession? I think that's a more important question, because that does affect all of us in a lot of different ways.
Well, I think that next week we should talk about that a little bit, Christina, because if we do dip into a recession, I believe it's going to be very steep, very short. But nonetheless, I think it's going to happen if there's a number of sell indicators going on there. Christina Gustin, UBS Wealth Management, or UBS Financial, RKG Wealth Management. Her website is on our website, kogo.com, keyword Sully. You can also call her 619-557-4758. She helps us out every week. As I say that, she hasn't even committed to that, but I'm going to make her do that. Coming up, Tom DelBacarro, business analyst. It's all coming up on San Diego Business Saturday. It's News Radio 600 Kogo. News Radio 600 Kogo. It's San Diego Business Saturday. I'm Sully. Welcome to your weekend. Thanks again to Christina Gustin of UBS Financial. Coming up later in the program, Tom Blair with Manpower. Okay, a couple of things. First of all, you can catch me every morning in for George Chamberlain for the time being over at the Morning News with Ted and LaDonna here on News Radio 600 Kogo. Of course, a few mornings a week over at KUSI, Good Morning San Diego, and the nationally syndicated television and radio broadcast nationwide, coast to coast, 110 million broadcast homes, 150 radio stations, and in 175 countries. Big Biz Show with myself and my partner of 22 years, Russ T. Nails, on the air. You can go to bigbizshow.com and check us out. You can also follow us on all social media platforms. If you want to follow me personally on social media, it's at Sully Speaks, and I'd love to get your questions answered. I'm going to invite a few of you in studio in the weeks to come, and just let you guys free for all for an hour, asking me questions about the economy and the stock market. I've had a number of people here. I know Delana over at 94.1. I know Cookie over at KGB. I know a couple of the guys like Mike Costa over at 1360 Fox Sports San Diego have all asked me to come in and have a sit-down roundtable and let you guys ask some questions. So if you want to do that, it's pretty simple. Just go to kogo.com, keyword Sully. Send us an email there. Either me, producer Lady Mary, or myself will get back to you, and we'll let you guys come in studio one time and have you guys just ask me questions. I don't want to do a full-blown buy-seller hold where I'm giving you my recommendations on stocks. Well, I'm willing to do a couple of those. But if you have real questions, about the economy and such, I think that's something we should take a look at. The interesting part about this trade war is who's going to win. And I can't wait to hear what Tom says about this, because he and I could talk for hours about the economy and the intersection of Washington, D.C., international trade and the economy, and we're both generally on the same page. Put it this way, China's economy cannot withstand a trade war. The U.S. can, mainly because the fundamentals of our economy is the strongest in the world. And for China, a tariff increase is going to lead to inflation, and further escalation is going to bring more of the same, as well as slow down their economy. They are in a very, very, very fragile, shall I say, fragile economic sort of position. And what's more important, they're blustering. So every time you hear them fire a shot across our bow, that's all it really is. Joining us now on News Radio 600 Kogo, San Diego Business Saturday, Tom DelBacarro. Tom, give me your top-down look, because since the 5th of May, obviously we are close to correction territory in a number of fronts here, but still, consumer confidence is almost at an all-time high for 20 years. Our economic standards, our unemployment, our wage growth, all killing it. This is a good indication that the stock market is not necessarily the economy. It's not the same thing, but they're attached. Give us your take on what's going on with this trade war. Is Donald Trump negotiating this like you would negotiate it as an attorney, as a transactional guy?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Sully. Sure. There's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in this. We've talked about this. I would only amend what you say about China in this regard. One, their government cares much less about public opinion than ours, so it's willing to slog through and has the power to do things wrong and not be held accountable. And also, of course, they look at things in the very long term, like 50, 100 years, whereas most political cycles in America is as far as a politician will look. So I think China is willing to absorb the pain in some regards more than the United States will, but nevertheless, you are right. It will have real economic impact in China. We know that money is flowing out of their stock market into other markets. We actually know that manufacturers are beginning to reconsider where they do business. For instance, they can do business in Vietnam right now with lower labor costs and less political harangue, because Vietnam is now pretty pro-capitalist. And so China is taking a risk here because there are alternatives now on where people can go. And quite simply, they're doing this calculus.
So here's my question real quick, because you are spot on. The question that people ask all the time is, why is Donald Trump taking such a hard stance? Because look what he's doing to the market. Look what I think there's two reasons personally. Because first of all, exactly what you just said, because the ebb and the flow of this thing, it's going to feel worse than it probably really is at first. People hate change. Change always hurts in the beginning. But I think also, and you can tell me because you're more of an international expert than I am, the only thing the Chinese understand is strength, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can't write. They're not going to get their attention by writing a letter, I don't think.
Yeah, well, there's two things Trump is doing here. First of all, he truly cares in his heart about American production and manufacturing. And he wants to see it, bring it back home. And there's two elements to that. There is the problems our own government has created for our own manufacturers, meaning bad tax policies and bad or unreasonable levels of regulation. He's worked on that. And he honestly believes that through these trade negotiations, he can create a better balance so that the United States manufacturers and farmers and everyone else can do better at home. There's a second element of this which doesn't get discussed enough, but I am convinced that the people in the administration are focused on it, which is this. China is a long-term threat on many levels. They're not just a trading partner. They are also represent a geopolitical threat. And there's no reason to be doing business on their terms and, in a sense, long-term, fueling their ability to cause problems around the world. Maybe you can trade with them on your terms, but it's a mistake for two geopolitical powers, for one of them to submit to the other and make the other rich. Yes. And he is looking at this at a longer term. I would add this third thing. Trump's unafraid. He's not your typical politician. He shows up to work and thinks things should be done.
Well, the other part too is, here's a guy. Listen, I hate to stereotype, but we got what we got. We elected a construction guy out of New Jersey. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we're going to win this deal. China's an economic predator. He's not going to stand for it. That's just, look what happened when China tried to impose soybeans just a short time ago. He dealt with that very swiftly. He doesn't like to lose also. Now, maybe that's, obnoxious to some people because of his perceived ego. But the fact of the matter, China is an economic predator, Tom. And what we've done over the last several years is we've traded, in my opinion, we've traded the cheap manufacturing, the cheap labor for looking the other way. at Beijing's misbehaviors on U.S. intellectual property rights and the creation of a state-owned enterprise that steals our stuff and makes fake Louis Vuitton purses and Nike shoes. And the fact of the matter is there has been an imbalance in the tariff issue between the two countries because China has imposed tariffs on 95% of U.S. imports forever, and we were in the 30-40% range for a long time.
And nobody has done much about it because it is such a difficult long-term problem. This isn't a negotiation that you can do over a weekend or do an all-nighter on.
Well, wait, you're an attorney. You have to do. Is this because we're dealing with China? Would it be different if we were dealing with, let's say,
England? Yes.
Yes, England, for example. Would it be faster? Is it just the way the Chinese do business? Is that the reason?
Well, remember, the Chinese have a long-term goal of supremacy.
Yeah.
They're not going to give things away in the name of freedom. If you're negotiating with the EU or England or Australia, they actually do believe in some levels of free trade for the benefit of the consumer. But that's not what China thinks about. China thinks about it wants to have, and just give me a second here, military trajectory lags behind economic trajectory. And what I mean by that is the more powerful your economy, the more powerful your military, and the more you can extend it. China wants a powerful economy because as part of its plans to have hegemony over the Asia and beyond is a strong military.
Sure.
It wants the manufacturing at home for military purposes as well. And so it's not going to easily give up this kind of thing. Now, look, you and I and a lot of other people think, well, okay, if you created a free market economy over there, you'd actually have an even more powerful military capacity. But the problem with that for those in Beijing who govern
Sure.
is that they could lose their power in a free society. So they're doing the best they can in their mind to sort of run the trade the way they want to, because that's how they can get what the most out.
And the rest of the world is watching, Tom. I mean, again, like I said before, the Chinese-American trade is a pillar of the international economic landscape, and it facilitates growth for us and China, the two superpowers, but it also benefits the rest of the world, and that's why everyone's watching. How do you think life would be? Because look, let's face it, the average worker in Vietnam makes $3,800 a year versus the average worker in Beijing making $10,300 a year, which is much cheaper than the average worker in the U.S. who makes 3 times that. If things shift over to Vietnam, would things be that horrible for everyone? I mean, I realize there'd be a gestation period, but maybe this does change the landscape and creates, maybe this thing called competition, which we like in the free market economy.
No, it would be 100% better if it was in Vietnam. We want Vietnam, which is a pro-capitalist society now, to have that manufacturing as compared to China, because it would reduce China's power long term. It also, look, in any business negotiation, when you go into it, you have your position, but what's really important is your backup position. If you're stuck with only one supplier, then you're not in a good position.
Well, and that's exactly what has gone on in this negotiation for so long, is there's been one supplier that we've turned our heads the other way on with respect to ripping us off our intellectual property and our designs, and they go take it out the back of the manufacturing building, they go make it themselves and sell it cheaper, and you see it at the swap meet. Tom DelBacarro, the Divided Era, politicalvanguard.com. Thank you so much, pal. We'll see you next week.
All right.
Really good guy. Coming up, how's employment doing in San Diego? You might be surprised. Tom Blair with Manpower. News Radio 600 Kogo, San Diego Business Saturday. But first, we got news and traffic. News Radio 600 Kogo, San Diego Business Saturday. Sully here. Thanks so much for swinging by, and thanks again to Alon Gorin, our cryptocurrency expert, if there's such a thing. No, actually, he's a really smart guy. I think we're all trying to figure out what cryptocurrency is, and I guess if there's a guy that can explain it better than anybody else, it's Alon Gorin. You can go to his website, cryptoinvestsummit.com, if you want to learn more about it. I have to tell you, I don't have a nickel in cryptocurrency, but I can tell you, I can't help but take a look at it, mainly because of this blockchain infrastructure, because I think if the blockchain takes on, which is all about transparency supposedly, if the blockchain takes off, then that's going to change everything. It'll take every middleman out of every transaction ever, including your stockbroker, including your mortgage broker. I don't know if we can believe that or not, but that's certainly the case. Here on San Diego Business Saturday, we've had the opportunity to interview iconic folks in San Diego that have started business here as well as internationally, with respect to guys like Steve Forbes and such. But we've also had Ernie Hahn from the Convention Center. We've had Mayor Kevin Faulconer. We've certainly had a number of iconic businessmen in San Diego. Dan Negroni, millennial expert. I'm really excited about our guest today because I've been a fan for such a long time, and as a kid here who was born and raised in San Diego like myself, I certainly, even before I was in business and part of the business community, and certainly before media, I was in high school when this next guest actually started and built Manpower. His name is Phil Blair. He is one of San Diego's most visible and respected business leaders. He's a regular on San Diego airwaves as well as KOSI television, where you can find me a number of mornings a week. But I wanted to get him in to talk about not only the employment side of things, but to talk about his career and how he started in San Diego. And I'm very, very excited to bring to you in San Diego Business Saturday, Phil Blair. Phil, sir, thank you so much for swinging by today.
Sully, good morning. Nice to be with you.
So let's start from the beginning, because I was a nimble 17-year-old in 1977 at Claremont High School, and you started with your partner Mel Katz Manpower of San Diego, and it has turned into the largest franchise of its type in the U.S. Talk about how you started that, and what were you doing before that, and how did the whole thing get started?
Well, we had, as I give talks about this, we had every strike against us, but gosh, fate works out sometimes. Mel and I were buyers for a chain of department stores in Phoenix, and we traveled to New York City a lot and L.A. on business, and we became good friends, and we wanted to move to San Diego, and so we'd sneak over here every chance we could. And then we decided to move here and had to figure out how we're going to earn a living in San Diego. And after researching lots of silly things like a pinball machine shop with ice cream involved and tour agency and all sorts of things, we sort of landed on this business that Mel's father was in called temporary help at Manpower. And basically our first best sales job, we talked the president of the company into selling the Manpower operation, which had been here 15 years already, to sell it and turn it into a franchise. So that was our very first franchise. It was doing $9,000 a week in sales at the time with 3 staff and losing money. And we said, hey, if we fall on our face, maybe you'll lose less money because you won't have had to cover it for these months. So fast forward, our sales are almost $3 million a week now, and
wow.
Still love the business. Our franchises are San Diego, Temecula, Las Vegas, Spokane, and Albuquerque. And we have about 3,000 people out working every day. And it's still fun. We love it.
So I have to ask you, when people think about temporary help, and I think the new term for it is employee leasing, are they one and the same, or are they different from where it was before and where it is now?
Well, employee leasing is sort of more like a PEO, where small companies don't want to have employees, and there are companies out there that will take your 5, 6, 8 employees, put them on their payroll long term, give them benefits that you want them to have and all that sort of thing. Temporary staffing is more, I've got a project, I need 5 engineers to work on it for 6 months, and if the project doesn't work out, then we shake hands after 6 months and say thanks for your help, and they come back to Manpower.
I have to ask you, because after
and if they do like them, they hire them perm.
Well, sure,
from us.
yeah, which
So
makes sense.
It goes both ways.
You've got a terrific book called Job One: 500,000 Hires and Counting. Subtitle is Starting Out or Starting Over. Talk about the book and sort of some of the insights, because there's been a lot of praise for this book over the years, and from some pretty high caliber CEOs. Talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, well, I'm really proud of that. It was a necessity during the recession, because I keep telling people the best way to find jobs, and still in this great market, the best way to find jobs is through networking. And who better to network with than a guy who hires thousands of people every year.
Sure.
And I couldn't possibly meet with everybody. So finally my PR firm, which was MJE Marketing, said, why don't you write a book? Well, so you can give people the book and not feel badly about not meeting with them. So I wrote the book during the recession. And the thing that's really different about it is it's written from HR's point of view. So there's lots of tips about how to deal with HR departments, HR managers, business owners, to see what our hot buttons are and what turns us off that applicants do. So it's a road through career choices. And one of the things when I'd meet with people is they'd say, I need a job. And I'd say, well, what kind of work are you looking for? And they say, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. So this book is really about walking people through decisions they need to make about different career paths that interest them and different companies that they would like to work at. So when they sit down with somebody like me, they can say, I'm really interested in sales, I'm interested in marketing, and in the HR field. Well, now we've got something to talk about. Because otherwise I go, well, do you want to be a landscaping person and mow lawns, or do you want to be a brain surgeon? I mean, what is I don't know. I mean, that's just impossible to work with. So that's what the book is about, and it's so valid now because how you tee yourself up for an interview and how you need to know when it's time to move on is really important to managing your career. And the theme of the books, and the second one is Job One for America's Veterans. But the theme in both books is we need to be our own career manager. We're in charge of our career and what happens to it and where it goes. And defeat to me is somebody looking back after 20 years in accounting and going, I never liked accounting in day one, but everybody said I was good at it and I should do that, and I majored in it in college. So then I got my first job in accounting and I did well, but I never liked it. Well, I want people to wake up in the morning excited to go to work, and that's my goal.
I have to ask you, by the way, Phil Blair joins us here on News Radio 600 KOGO, San Diego Business Saturday. I've got to ask you, so we suffered what I call the Great Correction in 2009.
How nice, how euphemistic, huh?
Right. Everybody else calls it the Great Recession. But I've got to ask you, a lot of people, myself included, because I own a television studio, employ some guys, and been an entrepreneur in this town for several years. Many of us, instead of going out of business, sort of reinvented ourselves as business people. But then again, there were those employees who got let go during that time that had to reinvent themselves either by getting a new education or becoming entrepreneurs. And you just talked about that, someone just told me to go into accounting because they said I'd be good at it. How many times have you seen someone reinvent themselves and it's just been flat on their face because they were doing something they were passionate about? And I've always had a philosophy that passion doesn't necessarily equal success. You hear that all the time, but if passion without talent is like an American Idol audition. I mean, these people think they're going to be the next Lady Gaga or something. How can you tell when somebody reinvents themselves that they're going down that right path and it's not just because, it's either an easier path or just because they think they would be good at something like that? I mean, that's got to be a hard discussion for a guy like you to have with someone who's actually remolding their dream, so to speak.
Well, it is, and I evolved because of all of this into being a career coach. So I work with people who are very frustrated about, I've got a job, but I don't like it, or I'm bored, or my company's not doing well, and I want to move on, or I need to move on, but I don't know what I want to do, and I don't want to keep doing what I am doing. So there's lots of questions, lots of discussion. I mean, you almost become a psychologist about what makes them happy, what's important to them. Some people, money is important, and it's less important that they like what they do. Somebody who sells, let's say, a stockbroker or a life insurance guy. I grew up poor, and I am focused on money. I want to work really hard. I want to get X amount of money in the bank, and then I'll worry about finding something I like to do.
And at the end of the day,
I don't like what I do, but I'm focused on the money. Well, that's just fine because they're focused and know what their end goal is. And that's super. What I don't like is they pay me a lot of money, but I hate it, and it's not worth the money. But I don't know how to get out of this. It's like on the spinning wheel. And they just need to stop and make lots of decisions, the choices. They've got to interview a lot of people, informational interviews, You seem to like what you're doing, Sully. Why do you like it? What is it about this industry? What is it about owning your own company? How did you get here? And then you just meet lots of people, and you make a diary, and then it all at once starts to evolve. And you may be successful or not. You may think you loved going back and teaching, because I love kids and I love teaching, and it didn't work out. But at least you tried it.
Yeah.
Right? You didn't just keep doing accounting till you were 60 and retired. Right,
just because someone said that you were going to be good at it. His name is Phil Blair. First, still right there. I want to talk to you a little bit about the metrics here in San Diego for a minute. By the way, visit his website, by the way, job-one.com. Fantastic stuff. You can read all about Phil, about the book. He's got a great section there called The Philosophy. I can tell you, as a radio veteran here on News Radio 600 Kogo for 22 years, I can't tell you how many times I have taken Phil's wisdom from the UT or the San Diego Business Journal and made it my own on the air. Of course, I attribute it to him. More of Phil Blair. I'm Sully. San Diego Business Saturday continues. News Radio 600 Kogo. News Radio 600 Kogo, San Diego Business Saturday. I'm Sully. Good to have you along today. Captain of industry, one of my favorite journalists and editorial writers for the UT and the San Diego Business Journal, Phil Blair. I don't think Phil knew what a fan I was. Phil, you were part of my show prep for 23 years on Kogo and all the other stations. So I got to say thanks for saving me a bunch of time.
Sully,
Well, at least, listen, I gave you credit at the time, most of the time. So I think that's important to come clean. Hey, let's talk about the San Diego area, sort of an economic summary. It came out on April 3rd, just a few weeks ago, talking about U.S. unemployment rate, around anywhere between 4.1% and 4.4%. San Diego area is around 3.5%. Does that line up with what you're finding with the job market right now?
Oh, it is. It is. We've been better than the state and better than national for years now, which is always very indicative of the strength of our economy. So we're really happy with that.
Where are the jobs now versus where they were when you first started? As I said, I grew up in this town. My mom worked at General Dynamics. My dad worked at A.O. Reed, and I sort of saw, we had this aerospace industry that sort of took over for the fishing industry. And then when the aerospace industry went away, we went to something else. Perhaps it was craft beer, maybe. I don't know. Where were the jobs then when you started, and where are they now?
Well, for those of us who have been in San Diego long enough to remember Spectrum up on in Kearny Mesa, all developments and apartments and businesses. That used to be a huge General Dynamics plant, and then down by the airport where Spay Wards is now was all General Dynamics, and it was a huge one horse town. I mean, as General Dynamics went, so went San Diego, because we were such a military town, and our tourism industry hadn't developed, let alone any of the high-tech stuff. So when General Dynamics stopped building missiles here, it was a huge hit to San Diego. But the evolution over the years is just amazing, of the success of UCSD and all of the companies that have spun out of there, and SDSU, and the biomedical field and medical device that's developed here. So it's a much, much more sophisticated town and much more diversified. Qualcomm has sort of taken over that role of General Dynamics as far as how big it is, with 13,000 employees here. But it's such a wonderful, high-tech, diversified company that it doesn't have big swings. It doesn't lose a contract and lay off 5,000 people, sort of thing. Yeah. So it's a much healthier economy, much more diversified, much more high-paying also, which is always good for the economy. Yeah, sure, especially with the cost of living here in San Diego and the median home price is not going anywhere for a while. It's interesting that General Dynamics Convair parking lot is where most of us learn to drive.
when our parents took us over in the Delta 88.
We couldn't hit anything for miles,
right. It was either the stadium or that. I want to ask you with respect to we're talking about market drivers in San Diego, and I get asked to quote this all the time. And the interesting part is I always have to caveat that you really don't know, but military is our biggest market driver, followed by tourism. But where does what is third now? Is it biotech? Is it technology? Is it craft beer?
Well,
where does that stand?
The three-legged stool. It's military tourism, and then the innovation economy,
okay.
And that's sort of all the technology, all the research, all the venture capital that's flowing into town, everything that's happening up around UTC and High Bluffs Drive up in the Del Mar area, and then up in Carlsbad and San Marcos and all that way through there. It's just lots of good, healthy companies that are doing well, and we keep overachieving in our venture capital raising here and wonderful successes. So it's very good how diversified it is.
So
and that's healthy.
So talking about the word on the street, we keep on hearing Apple's going to add more jobs in San Diego. We've heard some rumors about Amazon. What's the word on the street with respect to some of the bigger tech companies and the ones that we invest in coming to San Diego?
Well, the FANGs, which everybody is fighting to get into their market, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix,
sure.
Google.
Right.
We're being discovered here in San Diego, and what's happening up in the Seattle area and San Francisco and Palo Alto in that area is it has gotten so expensive, and they're having to pay so much for talent to get it up there, and they steal from each other constantly. So I heard a statistic a month ago that the average perm job in the Silicon Valley area is 9 months because they keep stealing good employees from
sure.
each other. So companies are saying, enough with this. Let's get out of town. Let's do a beachhead in Austin, and let's do one in Fort Worth, and let's do one now in San Diego. So we've seen Apple bring down 1,000 jobs, and they just upped it to 1,200. Amazon is here, Walmart is here, and it's their technology field,
sure.
right? It's not Walmart buying offices. It's
right.
really their software and their development people. And part of that is because Qualcomm for so many years has attracted such great talent to San Diego that it is a hotbed of talent here. And that's why companies move to a location. It's not free rent or free land or a exit off of a freeway, mm-hmm. because we have none of that. We have expensive land, expensive water, expensive electricity, real estate, all that. But the quality of life here is so good that talent wants to stay in San Diego.
Do you think
the number of people that I interview that say, "Oh, I just want to stay in San Diego.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to move out of San Diego."
Are people taking less money for that, Phil? I mean, are they paying
yes.
the Waterview tax by not only paying more money for housing and such, but they're taking less money from their employers?
They're taking less money if they're here, and I always use that comparison of the frog in the hot water. If you grew up here,
right.
Real estate, hopefully you bought a house, so you're writing it up.
Sure.
Moving a family into San Diego is culture shock.
Yeah.
So that's very difficult.
Financially,
so
financially, you mean, right?
Young people here. So out of San Francisco, they got out of college, got off $120,000 to go up to Google or Facebook
sure.
or somewhere up there, and their commute is an hour each way. They're sharing a apartment with 4 other guys and paying $3,000 each for rent, and they want to get out of that hassle, especially when they want to start settling down. But they want a quality of life, and they want to stay in California, and the talent is moving down here to accept jobs, knowing they're earning less money. But number one, it goes farther, and their quality of life is so much better. Yeah,
you mentioned something very interesting, and that's how up in Silicon Valley there's employee pilfering and leeching and such because there's such competition for talent. You think that's going to happen here in San Diego, or are we too much at the tip of the spear here for that to start happening to us?
Sully, I know it's happening. My company does it.
Oh. Yeah. You're in the business
of it.
It's
placement. It's the search business.
Yeah.
And in our industry, we joke You're either a customer or you're a source.
Yeah.
So you never steal from your customers, obviously. That would be the stupidest thing known to man. But if you're not a user of Manpower services, then you're fair shopping for us. And that's what's starting to happen because there's specific skill sets that are needed, and people are ready to move on. You know, the average permanent job in America is slightly over 4 years. It's not 35 years
Right.
like it used to be.
Right.
And for millennials, it's slightly over 2 years.
Well, let's talk
people are
let's talk
anxious
about
to
that.
move and to move on.
You know,
when
you've got
they're anxious to move, it's not necessarily for more money. Usually it's for more challenge. I want to work with the newest technology. I want to work with excited coworkers. I want to respect the company I work for and be very proud of it. And then is money. So we think it's money is why people move, and sometimes that has to happen in their life.
I have to ask you though.
It's quality of the job.
So you brought up millennials, and I own a couple of millennials. They're in their 20s. Thankfully, they're
sell them off.
Yeah, well, I have. One of them's off the payroll. The other one's very close to being off the payroll. But many of us are
good.
Yeah, we did good. They go through that tube of adolescence, and when they come out the other side, you think you're done, and you're not done.
No.
Let me ask you this. There's some studies that say that in the next 7 years, 75% of our customers and our workforce will be millennials. Okay, so whether it's 30% or 70%, I don't care.
Yeah.
Corporations are going to have to deal with that and quickly. How are you consulting folks on both sides of the equation on the fact that the workforce is changing and it's not you and it's not me anymore?
Yeah, well, and if we get a chance, Sully, we'll talk about Generation Z, which is coming next. But there are fresh millennials, and there are seasoned millennials. Mm-hmm. Millennials they fit in that age group, but they've settled down. They own a condo or a house. They're married with one or two children. They're thinking more about careers and establishment and long term. Early, fresh millennials are, I can live anywhere. I don't care so much about money. I care more about quality of life, and I can work from home and flexible schedule and lots of time off, and I can go surfing at lunch,
mm-hmm.
and that works for the first job, the second job, the third job, and then you start to mature and settle down.
Sure.
So fresh millennials will like that, but the average is the 2 years. Because they tend to go to high-tech companies, especially startups and entrepreneurial, that didn't make it.
Yeah.
Or they see the writing on the wall and get a better offer somewhere else. So that 2-year average for millennials as they mature becomes 8, 10, 6 years, right?
Yeah, exactly. And as you said before, it's because of how seasoned they are versus how wet behind the ears they are. Phil, I could spend another hour with you. His book, Job One, Phil Blair, you can go to his website, job-one.com. That's W-O-N. Phil, I can't wait to have you back on the air. I have much respect for you, sir, and you've certainly shaped my career. That's it for us on this San Diego Business Saturday. I'm Sully. Till next time, News Radio 600 Kogo.